The Day the Sun Fell Twice. The untold story of the town that helped end the world and started a new one. Before we begin, take a breath, because what you're about to hear sounds like science fiction. It sounds like conspiracy. It sounds like the kind of story that only happens in movies. But this happened. It happened in America. And for a few terrifying seconds in July 1945, the fate of the entire human race hung over a patch of desert in New Mexico. This is the true story of the day the sun rose twice, and the small, secret town that made it happen. If you had driven south from Albuquerque in the summer of 1945, you would have seen nothing remarkable. Desert, heat, endless sky, jackrabbits darting between sagebrush, dust lifting in slow spirals. But hidden beyond the dunes and dry lake beds was something so secret that even the Vice President of the United States didn't know about it. It was called the Manhattan Project, and at its heart was a quiet mountain town named Los Alamos. Officially, it didn't exist. Mail addressed there was sent to P.O. Box 1663. Road signs were removed. Maps were altered. Children who lived there were told never to say where they were from. And behind guarded gates, some of the greatest scientific minds in history were racing against time. Because somewhere across the ocean, another race was underway. And whoever won would decide the future of the world. In 1939, a letter arrived at the White House. It was signed by Albert Einstein. Einstein warned President Franklin D. Roosevelt that Nazi Germany might be developing a weapon of unimaginable power, a weapon based on splitting the atom. At the time, the idea sounded almost absurd. Atoms were invisible, microscopic, harmless, most believed. But a small group of physicists understood something terrifying. Inside every atom was energy, not just a spark, a storm. If released in a chain reaction, that energy could equal thousands of tons of TNT. Entire cities could disappear in seconds. Roosevelt read the letter, and within weeks, the most ambitious scientific effort in human history quietly began. By 1942, the United States had entered World War II. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, America was fully at war. Factories roared to life. Shipyards flooded with steel. Young men shipped overseas. But while the world focused on tanks and planes, something else was happening behind locked doors. The government bought land in Tennessee, in Washington State, and in the high mesas of New Mexico. Entire communities were uprooted overnight. Farmers were told to leave. Fences went up. Armed guards appeared. In Oak Ridge, thousands of workers were hired, but never told what they were building. In Hanford, massive reactors rose from the desert. And in Los Alamos, perched on a remote plateau, the brain of the operation took shape. Its leader was a thin, intense physicist named J. Robert Oppenheimer. He was brilliant, charismatic, haunted. Oppenheimer gathered refugees from Europe, Nobel laureates, mathematicians barely out of college, chemists, engineers, soldiers. They worked day and night. They argued. They calculated. They doubted. Because no one had ever built such a weapon before. No one knew for certain if it would even work. And some feared something worse. What if it worked too well? There was a real debate among scientists. What if igniting the bomb ignited the atmosphere itself? What if the chain reaction spread beyond control? What if, in trying to end a war, they ended the world? The calculations suggested it was unlikely, but unlikely is not the same as impossible. And yet, the work continued, because Germany was still out there, and fear is a powerful motivator. By July 1945, Nazi Germany had surrendered. Adolf Hitler was dead. Europe was celebrating, but the war in the Pacific raged on. Japan fought with relentless determination. American casualties were mounting. Military planners predicted that a full invasion of Japan could cost hundreds of thousands of American lives, perhaps millions of Japanese. And so, despite Germany's defeat, the project did not stop. It accelerated. The device they built was nicknamed the Gadget. It was not sleek, not elegant. It looked like a cluster of pipes and wires wrapped around a steel sphere. But inside it was the power of a star. The test was scheduled for July 16, 1945. Location: a desolate stretch of desert called the Jornada del Muerto. Translated from Spanish, it means Journey of the Dead Man. The name had been there for centuries. No one knew how fitting it would become. At 5:29 a.m., before dawn, countdown reached 0. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the desert became brighter than noon. Observers miles away instinctively dropped to the ground. A sphere of fire rose into the sky. Colors no human had ever seen shimmered across the sand. The shockwave followed, a violent roar that rolled across the valley and shattered windows more than 100 miles away. A mushroom cloud climbed 40,000 feet into the air. The first atomic explosion in human history. Later, Oppenheimer would recall a line from the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The sun had risen, and then, for a moment, it had risen again. But here is the part most people don't know. For weeks after the test, strange things began happening in nearby ranch towns. Cattle developed burns. Residents reported metallic tastes in their mouths. Ash fell from the sky like gray snow. No one had warned them. No one had told them what had happened. Secrecy was absolute, even as the radioactive fallout drifted silently across the desert. Decades later, families would demand answers. Some would claim cancers, illnesses, government silence. The official explanations came slowly, if at all. The birth of the atomic age had a hidden cost, and it was paid by ordinary Americans who never knew they were part of the experiment. On August 6, 1945, a single bomber named the Enola Gay lifted off from the Pacific island of Tinian. Inside its belly was a uranium bomb nicknamed Little Boy. Its target, the Japanese city of Hiroshima. At 8:15 a.m., the bomb detonated. The city vanished in light. 3 days later, another bomb fell on Nagasaki. By August 15th, Japan surrendered. World War II was over. Crowds filled Times Square. Strangers. Church bells rang. But in Los Alamos, celebration was quieter. Some scientists cheered, others wept. They had ended the war, but they had also changed the human story forever. Because now the world knew, and it could never unknow. Within 4 years, the Soviet Union tested its own atomic bomb. The Cold War began. School children practiced duck and cover. Backyard bomb shelters appeared across America. The doomsday clock ticked closer to midnight. What had begun as a desperate wartime gamble became a permanent shadow over civilization. And yet, the same discovery that created unimaginable destruction also powered cities, revolutionized medicine, advanced physics beyond imagination. The atom was both curse and miracle. Today, if you visit Los Alamos, you'll find a quiet town with pine trees and hiking trails. Families walk there. Dogs. Children ride bicycles. There is a museum. Photographs on the walls. Black and white images of young scientists smiling beside chalkboards. They look ordinary, almost innocent, but they carried the weight of the world. Because for a brief moment in 1945, they held the power to extinguish it, and they chose to press the button. History often tells us that progress is inevitable, that innovation is destiny. But the story of the atomic bomb reminds us of something far more unsettling. The greatest turning points in history are not made by monsters. They are made by people. Brilliant, flawed, afraid, hopeful. And when the sun rose twice over the desert of New Mexico, humanity crossed a line from which there was no return. The world did not end that morning, but it began to live differently, under a brighter, more dangerous sky.